That Christmas Eve, I was pushed away from the dinner table, told that mother's place is in the kitchen. Not a scolding, just a sentence, cold and numb. And at that moment, I knew I was no longer a part of their world. But you know what? My silence was not weakness. It was the first step in a quiet, profound, and irreversible revenge. Hear me out. It's a story you won't forget. If it resonates with you, leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more heart-wrenchingly true emotional journeys like this. When my son Eric called and asked if I wanted to spend a few months with him and his wife Madison, I had to know something was wrong. His tone was so practiced, so polite, it was like he was reading from a script someone else had written. "Mom," he said, "we've been talking and we think you should stay with us. You've been alone since Dad died in the house. Has been quiet, right?" It was Madison's idea, he added. Madison. The same Madison who couldn't look me in the eye for more than 5 seconds on Thanksgiving. The same woman who winced when I brought her my signature apple pie because it was too sweet for her family's taste. Still, I said yes, because that's what mothers do. We say yes, even when our instincts scream no. I packed my modest suitcase, left the quiet beach house, and showed up at their modern 3-story suburban home with a smile and a pie. Madison greeted me with a hug that barely touched my shoulder. "It would be nice to have you here," she said with a stiff smile, "until things settled down." Settled? I didn't ask. I was too busy reading between the lines. That first night, I had dinner with them at the table. It fine, but even then, I could feel it like I was sitting in someone else's seat, like I wasn't supposed to be there the second week into my stay. I noticed the dinner table was suddenly too small. One evening, I came down just as Madison was setting 3 plates. When she saw me, she paused, blinked, then said, "Oh, I thought you weren't hungry." I hadn't said that. I hadn't said anything, but I nodded anyway and ate alone later in the kitchen, standing up. From there, it snowballed. Madison started leaving passive-aggressive sticky notes on the fridge. "Please rinse your dishes. The stove is not self-cleaning. No garlic. It lingers." I bit my tongue. Eric stayed quiet. He always stayed quiet. Then came the help I didn't know I'd offered. Madison handed me a laundry basket one afternoon, smiling sweetly. "You don't mind helping with a few things around the house, right?" She didn't wait for an answer. By the end of that week, I was doing their laundry, organizing their pantry, even vacuuming the steps because the cleaning lady doesn't come on Thursdays anymore. I didn't complain. I kept telling myself, they're busy. They have jobs. I'm just trying to help. But the line between helping and being used blurred fast. I offered to cook dinner one Friday. Madison looked at me and said, "Oh, we've already ordered sushi." They didn't invite me to join. I ate toast that night. Eric, my sweet boy, the child I raised with scraped knees and peanut butter sandwiches, didn't even look up from his phone. The next morning, the living room had been rearranged. My reading chair, yes, the one I had brought with me, was now in the garage to make space. I asked Madison where she put my knitting basket. "Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe storage," she said, not looking up from her tablet. Storage? It wasn't just the things I owned that were being moved. It was me. I was slowly being shifted to the edges of their home, and it wasn't accidental. One night, I overheard Madison on the phone. In the hallway? "She's sweet, but it's like babysitting an old cat, quiet but always there." She laughed. I didn't sleep that night. I just laid there in the guest room that was suddenly colder than usual, wondering how I'd become invisible in a house full of people, and that's when it hit me. I wasn't here to be part of a family. I was here because I was useful until I wasn't. It was Sunday morning when it all snapped. The sun had barely crept over the blinds when I heard voices drifting down the hall. Madison and Eric were in the kitchen. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I froze mid-step when I heard my name. "She's driving me crazy." "Eric," Madison hissed. "She's always here, sitting, watching, breathing." Eric sighed, the way he used to when I asked him to take out the trash as a teenager. "She's just trying to help." "No, she's hovering, and we don't need help. We need space. She doesn't fit in our life. She's your mother, not our responsibility." My breath caught in my throat. "She's been paying the grocery bills," Eric mumbled as if that excused my presence. Madison scoffed. "Yeah. Well, maybe she should pay rent too if she's going to act like a permanent guest. Or better yet, why don't you finally talk to her about moving out?" That was it. That was the moment the glass cracked. I stood in the hallway clutching, my robe around me like armor, and for the first time, I didn't feel like their house guest. I felt like their burden. I didn't go into the kitchen. I didn't say a word. I turned around, walked back into the guest room, and sat on the edge of the bed for a very long time. Around noon, Madison knocked. "You okay in there?" she asked, sugar-coated concern in her voice. "You didn't come down for breakfast." I smiled, too wide, just feeling a little off. "Might stay in today." "Oh, all right." Let me know if you need anything, she chirped, already halfway back down. The hall. Need anything. I needed to not feel like a parasite in my own son's house. That afternoon, I logged into my bank account for the first time in weeks. I stared at the transactions, grocery bills, household items, even a new sofa purchase I didn't remember agreeing to. It was in Eric's name, but charged to the card I'd handed over when I first arrived, just in case. The next click took me to Zillow, and I realized something else. My old condo, the one I had rented out after moving in with them, was available again. The tenants had just moved out. My name was still on the lease. I sat there for a long time, the screen glowing in front of me, and for the first time in weeks I felt something shift. I made one call, then another, quietly, calmly. By dinner I had packed 2 suitcases that evening, while Madison and Eric watched a true crime documentary on the couch like nothing had happened. I stood by the door with my bags. Eric turned, startled. "Where are you going, home?" I said simply. "Wait, what?" "I found a place. My place." I paused. "You don't need to worry about me anymore." Madison didn't say a word, just stared, mouth slightly open like she didn't think I'd actually do it. Eric stood, confused, defensive. "Mom, come on, you're overreacting." I looked him in the eye for the first time in weeks. No, I should have left the moment I started feeling like a ghost in this house. I turned the doorknob. "I love you, Eric," I said softly, "but I'm done being tolerated. I deserve to be wanted." And just like that, I walked out. The moment I closed the door behind me, the silence felt different, not like the suffocating kind in Madison and Eric's house, where I had to tiptoe around emotions like broken glass. No, this silence was clean, crisp, a blank canvas. I rolled my suitcases down the familiar sidewalk to the old condo building that still smelled faintly of eucalyptus from the neighbor's obsessive cleaning habit. The landlord had been shocked to hear from me, but more than happy to hand back the keys. I guess not many 64-year-old women call and ask for their independence back on a Tuesday. The place hadn't changed much. Still small, still humble, still mine. The furniture was mismatched and dusty, and the curtains were years out of style. But when I stepped inside and shut the door, I smiled. For the first time in months, I exhaled without shaking. That first night, I curled up on the old floral couch, wrapped in a crocheted blanket I'd made when Eric was in middle school. I didn't cry, I didn't ache. I didn't wonder if they'd call or even notice I was gone. I let the stillness hug me. The next morning I made tea, not for anyone else, just for me. Earl Grey, honey, no judgment. Then I unpacked. Box by box, drawer by drawer, I put my favorite mugs on the open shelf, stacked my scarves in the hallway closet, and filled the tiny kitchen with the smell of cinnamon apples. It was quiet work, healing work. Every cabinet I opened, every picture I hung, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I had buried somewhere between politeness and self-erasure. A week later, I found the storage bin full of art supplies I hadn't touched in years: watercolors, needles, embroidery, hoops, half-forgotten tools of joy. I started small: a pillowcase with dainty bluebells, a dish towel with sunflowers. It was messy, imperfect, and absolutely mine. Asterisk. And then, because I'm still a Mitchell and we don't do things halfway, opened an online store. Thread and Grace. I didn't expect much. Just a place to share the things I made with the world, however small that world might be. But within a month, orders trickled in. Then came comments, messages, women strangers thanking me for pieces that reminded them of their mothers, their grandmothers, themselves. And that did something to me. I started getting up earlier, taking walks to the market, smiling at strangers again. My world was small, yes, but it was full, and I was the one filling it. One Thursday morning, I received a voicemail from Madison. Just one sentence: "We noticed you took the spare house key." No apology, no concern, just control disguised as order. I deleted it without blinking. That weekend, I invited my neighbor, Ellie, over for tea. She was 72, sharp as a tack, and had been watching me move in with what I now recognized as cautious optimism. We sat on my little balcony, drinking from chipped porcelain mugs, talking about nothing and everything. For the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed. Not because I needed to keep the peace, but because I actually found something funny, and in that moment, I realized I hadn't just left a house. I'd walked away from an identity that had no room left for me. The self-sacrificing mother, the quiet observer, the free babysitter and invisible cook. No more. I was Claire Mitchell again. Not mom, not mother-in-law, not extra body on the couch, just me. It started with an email, no subject line, no signature, just a single line of text from Eric. "Mom, we need to talk." I stared at the screen for a long time, Not because I didn't understand, but because I did. 2 weeks later, they showed up. Not a phone call, not a text. They stood at my doorstep like two storm clouds dressed in business casual, trying to look composed. Madison was wearing that beige coat she always wore when she needed to look respectable. Eric looked older, tired. The kind of tired you don't get from staying up with a child, but from watching your world crack and not knowing where to put the glue. Claire, Madison began with a brittle smile. We were in the area. I said nothing. Eric cleared his throat. Can we come in? I let them stand there for a few more heartbeats. Then, with a voice I barely recognized as mindsteady.com, entirely detached, I said, 5 minutes. They stepped in like guests in a hotel lobby, looking around, measuring the walls, searching for judgment. I offered no tea, no chair, just the silence I had grown so comfortable in. Eric spoke first. We're in a bit of a situation, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. There were some layoffs. We're behind on the mortgage. Madison cut in, eyes glassy but sharp. We thought maybe you'd be willing to help. Just until we get back on our feet. There it was. The help. The just until. The script I knew by heart. You mean, I said slowly, you'd like the woman you made eat dinner alone in the laundry room to help you pay your bills. They both froze. Eric's face flushed. Mom, that's exactly what it was, I cut in. You didn't want a mother. You wanted a maid. A wallet. A woman who kept her head down and her mouth shut while you lived your picture-perfect life. Madison opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. Save it. I'm not here to rehash the past, but let me be clear, I don't owe you anything. They stood there, stunned. I watched Eric's shoulders fall, like he finally understood that the version of me who bent over backward for scraps of affection was dead and buried. Claire, Madison said, her voice suddenly soft, rehearsed. We made mistakes, but we're family. No, I replied. My tone even. You made that call when you looked me in the eye and said I wasn't a good fit for your family dinner table. You didn't just hurt my feelings. You erased me, and now you've come back. Not for reconciliation, but for rescue. Eric's eyes brimmed with something guilt, maybe. Or just desperation. So you're really not going to help? I smiled. Not out of joy, but from clarity. I have helped, I said. I gave you years. I gave you my peace, my money, my pride, and what I got in return was exile. They didn't speak, didn't even move. Just stood there in the hallway of the home they once told me was too small to host holidays. I opened the door. I hope you figure things out, I said, but I'm not your safety net anymore. I'm just your reminder that some people only learn after they've burned every bridge. And with that, they left. No apologies. No hugs, just the quiet click of the door closing behind them. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't question myself. I walked back into my kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat in the sun-drenched silence of a life finally reclaimed. Weeks passed after the confrontation. Not a peep from Eric or Madison. No calls, no texts. Just silence, and for once, I welcomed it. The garden was blooming again. Not just the plants, but me. I had joined a local crafting coop downtown, just a dozen women, mostly in their 50s and 60s, trading patterns, stories, and sometimes wine before noon. I started selling my hand-stitched linens and ceramic candle holders on Etsy, and to my surprise, they sold out quicker than I could make them. One of my tea towels was even featured in a home decor blog. Handcrafted with warmth and wisdom, it read, I smiled when I saw it. Not because of pride, but because someone finally saw me. People started inviting me again to brunch, to charity auctions, to sit on community boards. The woman they once labeled as old-fashioned now had a wait list for her embroidery classes. I wasn't anyone's background character anymore. One Saturday morning, I was hosting a little porch market in front of my house. Just a few tables, a thermos of coffee, some soft music playing through a Bluetooth speaker. I was talking to a customer when I noticed a small figure hovering awkwardly at the edge of the lawn. It was Lily, my granddaughter. She looked different, taller, thinner, shoulders a little heavier, as if they'd been carrying the tension of grown-up things she had no business knowing. I walked over slowly. She didn't run, she didn't smile, but she didn't leave either. Hi, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Can I sit with you for a while? No, Madison. No, Eric. Just Lily. Brave, wounded Lily. We sat under the oak tree. I gave her a lemonade. She gave me the story. Things at home weren't good. Madison was stressed all the time. Eric was distant. There were fights, cold dinners, closed doors, and more than once Lily heard my name whispered like a ghost by silence or guilt. I miss you, she finally said. Looking down at the grass, I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I never stopped loving you, Lily, not for a second. She looked at me with wet eyes, and for the first time since the betrayal, I felt something begin to loosen in my chest. Forgiveness? No, not yet. But something, that night, after Lily left. With a promise to visit again, I sat in my favorite chair and stared at the sea. It wasn't calm, not that night. The waves were restless, like my thoughts. I didn't regret anything. I had made the right choice, setting boundaries. But I also knew now that healing doesn't always come as vengeance or silence. Sometimes, it comes in the shape of a granddaughter on a Saturday morning asking for lemonade. The world had tried to shrink me. Madison tried to erase me. Eric tried to use me, but I was still here. And for the first time in a long, long while, I liked the woman I saw in the mirror. The morning air was crisp, kissed by salt and sunlight. Claire stepped onto her porch. With a cup of black tea, no sugar, no honey, just strong and steady, like her heart. Now it had been nearly a year since she walked out of Samantha's house. Since then, no apology came. Not from Samantha. Not from Emily, but Lily kept coming. Every Sunday, rain or shine, that girl would show up with a new drawing. A question about life, or sometimes just a silence she needed help holding. And Claire never asked for more. She gave what she had. A lap to cry on, hands to braid hair. A home that didn't ask her to earn her place. The garden had grown wild and vibrant just the way Claire liked it. Her porch was strewn with handmade wind chimes, and the scent of rosemary lingered in the breeze. She didn't keep a calendar anymore. She didn't need to. She was finally living on her own time. One afternoon, as she sat beneath the oak tree, her oak tree letter arrived in a pink envelope. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Emily, the note inside was short. A single line written in shaky teenage cursive. I didn't understand back then, but I do now. I'm sorry. Claire folded the letter, pressed it to her chest, and smiled. Not because everything was okay. Not because the past could be erased, but because the cycle was broken. She stood up, stretched her arms wide toward the open sky, and whispered to no one and everyone, I made it. No shouting, no grand finale, just a woman, barefoot in her garden, finally choosing herself. And this time she didn't ask for anyone's permission.